At approximately 10:30, 10:40 in the morning on Friday, our suspect, Michael Paul Brown, entered the Owl Bar here in Anaconda, and after a brief series of actions, opened fire and shot and killed 4 local residents. This is just absolutely horrific, something like we haven't seen in the state of Montana. We want to find this guy. This is a dangerous individual who has committed an absolutely heinous crime against this community and these victims.
On August 1st, a quiet Montana town was shattered when a gunman opened fire inside the Owl Bar in Anaconda, killing 4 people before disappearing into the wilderness. The suspect, Michael Paul Brown, is still at large, sparking a massive manhunt involving hundreds of officers. And as the investigation unfolds, we are going to break down what we know so far, including insights from a retired NYPD detective who has expertise in cases like this. And we will also explore the complex background of the suspect as well. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. It was an hour or so before lunchtime on August 1st in Anaconda, Montana, when the regulars began gathering at the Owl Bar. This is a small neighborhood tavern on the edge of town where locals often stopped in for a midday drink. But at approximately 10:30 a.m., the unthinkable happened. According to officials with Montana Division of Criminal Investigation, a lone gunman entered the bar armed with a rifle and opened fire, tragically killing 4 people inside. Now, as the investigation enters its 4th day at the time of this recording, authorities continue a massive manhunt for the suspected shooter, who they say is armed, dangerous, and possibly hiding in the rugged backcountry surrounding Anaconda. And as the manhunt continues, here is what we know so far. Authorities say that around, again, 10:30 a.m. on August 1st, 45-year-old, this is the suspect, Michael Paul Brown, entered the Owl Bar armed with a rifle, opened fire, killed 4 people inside. The victims have been identified as 64-year-old Nancy Loretta Kelly, the bartender working that morning, along with 3 patrons. 59-year-old Daniel Edwin Bally, 70-year-old David Allen Lynch, 74-year-old Tony Wayne Palm. All were residents of Anaconda. And police say security footage that captured Brown fleeing the scene shortly after the shooting. And at one point during his escape, he apparently stripped down to just his boxer shorts. Over the weekend, investigators released this image that they say shows Brown moments after the attack. His alleged getaway vehicle, a stolen white Ford F-150, was later found abandoned in a remote area known as Stumptown. It's about less than 5 miles west of Anaconda. However, there was no trace of him nearby. By August 3rd, the search effort had expanded to the rugged wilderness surrounding Barker Lake and Stumptown Road, remote terrain near the edge of the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest, which spans more than 3 million acres and is the largest national forest in Montana. Local, state, federal agencies, including the FBI, the ATF, the U.S. Marshals, they joined the operation. In fact, at its peak, roughly 250 officers were on the ground searching by foot, vehicle, helicopter. After 48 hours of intense searching, Montana Attorney General Austin Knudsen held a press conference to provide key updates on the investigation into this mass shooting in Anaconda.
At approximately 10:30, 10:40 in the morning on Friday, our suspect, Michael Paul Brown, entered the Owl Bar here in Anaconda, and after a brief series of actions, opened fire and shot and killed 4 local residents here in Anaconda. First of all, I want to offer our deepest and sincere condolences to the community of Anaconda and to the family and friends of these victims. This is just absolutely horrific, something like we haven't seen in the state of Montana, and thankfully we do not see these things very often in the state of Montana. At this point, I can confirm the names of our victims. 59-year-old Daniel Edwin Bailey, who was a patron at the bar that day. 64-year-old Nancy Loretta Kelly, who was the employee and bartender that morning. 70-year-old David Allen Leach, who was also a patron that morning. And finally, 74-year-old Tony Wayne Palm. All of the victims were from here in Anaconda. At this point, I also want to point out the fact we've got a tremendous law enforcement response that's responded here in Anaconda. I know at one point yesterday we had over 250 boots on the ground that were helping out with the manhunt and engaged trying to find this suspect. At this point, our suspect is still at large. And I'll go ahead and say this right now. We've got tremendous cooperation from Homeland Security, from our federal partners, the FBI, the U.S. Marshal Service. We want to find this guy. This is a dangerous individual who has committed an absolutely heinous crime against this community and these victims. Probably in the next 24 hours, you're going to see the law enforcement response shift a little bit. This is absolutely still priority number one, to find this suspect. But we've got a lot of resources here in Anaconda. They've been here for about 48 hours. They've got home agencies. It's still tourist season in western Montana, so we're not going to have as many resources here focused on the really sharp focused search. You're going to see that stance shift a little bit, but this is going to turn into a fugitive location operation at this point. I'll go ahead and announce right now that at this time we have a $7,500 reward, and that's just the initial reward. I'll also state that, but we have a $7,500 reward for any information that would lead us to Michael Paul Brown. We also have set up a hotline through the U.S. Marshal Service. This is really easy. 1-877-WANTED-2, the number 2.
By the way, talking law, like we do so many times here on Law and Crime Sidebar, there is a reason that Morgan & Morgan, our sponsor, is America's largest injury law firm. They're a firm with over 1,000 attorneys. You know why? Because they win a lot. They have recovered over $25 billion from more than 500,000 clients. In the past few months, client in Florida received $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. Pennsylvania, client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurer's $650,000 offer. Another client in Pennsylvania received $29 million after being offered only $500,000. And even if you think your case isn't worth millions of dollars, why not just start a claim and fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so simple. You can start a claim from your phone in just 8 clicks. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar by clicking the link below or scanning the QR code on screen. And Knutson also provided some more information about the suspect's initial movements following the shooting.
That was relatively soon after the crime was committed. We know he went to another location not far away. He got rid of some personal belongings and he got rid of his clothes. We have very good reason to believe that he is clothed. He does have shoes, and he's probably able to get around. There was some time there where the vehicle he ended up grabbing was loaded full of equipment. It was not his vehicle, it was a stolen vehicle, but there was camping equipment in it. We believe there was some clothing in it. So at this point, we have every reason to believe the suspect is fully clothed, shoes on his feet, able to get around.
Now, the last confirmed sighting of Brown was roughly between 12 and 12:30 on August 1st, so about 2 hours after the shooting. And Knutson also suggested that law enforcement may have been familiar with Brown.
The only information I have about that is I believe there probably is some criminal record. I think he's known to local law enforcement. That's all public record if he's got an arrest warrant or arrest records out there. But I don't have any specific information about that right now.
But despite that statement, we ran some background checks on the suspect through LexisNexis, TruthFinder, along with the search of Anaconda Deer Lodge County District Court records, and nothing turned up on our end of any previous criminal convictions or active warrants that were tied to Michael Paul Brown. Lots to unpack here. To help me do it, I want to bring on retired NYPD detective and adjunct professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, David Sarni. David, thank you so much for taking the time. It's great to see you.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Now, based on your experience, how typical or maybe atypical is a shooting like this in a small rural community like Anaconda, Montana? How does law enforcement even handle, trying to find someone in this very specific environment?
Well, that's the thing. Apparently he's known he's in town. It's a very small town. He's only 9,000. He knows the people. They probably know unfortunately, the people who were murdered. It's unusual. One thing about Montana, it is a gun area. There's a lot of people with firearms. It's not unusual to have a firearm. It's just usual that you have a person snapping like this and murdering people that, in such a small town. And, he's probably, when they say he's known to law enforcement, he's probably, because it's a small town in itself, 9,000 people, you kind of know who you are, know who's around there. But apparently also there were issues that he had mentally while he was residing there. So those are things that come up. Just because, there's no criminal record doesn't necessarily mean the law enforcement doesn't know
Sure.
of him.
Now, this collaboration with multiple agencies, so FBI, ATF, U.S. Marshals, I believe Homeland Security, is that typical when you're dealing with this kind of environment, this kind of community that maybe doesn't have those resources? And what does each agency do? Why is it important to have so many different agencies a part of this manhunt?
Well, it's beneficial because of the resource availability. You're talking about the ATF, federal law enforcement has more resources. They have the opportunity to use helicopters. You're talking with a small department. They only have the personnel they have, and they have whatever vehicles they have. Their budgets are a lot smaller. So if you can utilize the state and federal agents, your federal partners in this, not only the manpower, but again, the technological resources available to them. That's what you're looking for. And when you're dealing with this type of murder, you're talking, it's a mass shooting, multiple people murdered. You're going to have that type of response by law enforcement.
And if you're talking about a suspect who allegedly fled in a stolen car, had, I believe it was loaded with camping gear, does this give you an insight into what the plan might be, the mindset? How do investigators use this kind of information to maybe predict what he's going to do or where he's going to go? And we'll talk about state of mind. We'll talk about some mental health issues at play in a minute. But just from that fact alone, what do you think they're looking into?
I think it's good that they know about the stolen vehicle. They probably know what was in the vehicle. So that gives them an idea of what he has available to him when he fled the scene. So that's beneficial. That's one thing that's beneficial. But again, you're talking about a person who, again, another ex-military individual who's involved in a murder and fleeing into the woods in a sense. This, there's a lot of parallels to, unfortunately, other mass manhunts that are going on in the Northwest. It's unfortunate. It's tragic. But I will tell you this: the benefit of having so many people and so many boots on the ground, in a sense, the 250 members there are being utilized. You want to get as many people out there to find, because you got to get this guy, because you don't know what he's going to do afterwards. I mean, this is he strips down to his underwear at the end of this. We don't know his mindset at this point.
Tracing the gun, right? The ammunition to the gun, to the purchase. How important is that for the investigation, the actual murder weapon, and trying to understand how it was obtained, where he got it from, assuming he did this? That seems to be why the ATF may be a part of this investigation as well.
They always want to make sure about how was the firearm obtained in a proper manner. That's the whole thing. Was it a straw purchase? Someone purchased for him? Was it a stolen gun? So they're going to do as much background check on that. You have the ballistics, obviously, that you're working on too, to determine if this gun was used in any other criminality prior to. And that's, again, this is part of the things you're going to need when you make the apprehension, and you have to, bring this to court. If this person, if he's caught and arrested, you have to get all of this material available for court presentation later date, if there is a court presentation, because right now it's been several days and he's not caught yet. And
there are a few more key points from the AG's press conference that are worth unpacking here. So Knudsen noted that, quote, "Thankfully, we do not see these things very often in Montana," referring, to the scale of the mass shootings. The thing about that is, if you look at data from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, it paints a broader picture of gun violence in the state. In 2022, Montana had a firearm death rate of 23.9 per 100,000 people. So that is one of the highest rates in the country. That year, 274 people died from gun-related incidents in the state. And for context, the state's population was just over 1 million. That's according to the U.S. Census Bureau estimates. So how do you interpret this apparent contrast, Dave, between rare mass shootings, high overall gun deaths in a state like Montana?
Well, again, you're talking about a smaller community such as that. You're not talking about Butte or a larger city area. So you can always have statistics as far as the gun violence is. The more detailed thing is how were the deaths? How did the deaths occur? Were there murders? Were there homicides? Was it accidental shootings? These are things that have to come into play when you talk about any statistic. You'll have a number out there. I mean, it does seem like a very high number. You could look at the sources and then break it down into the types of gun deaths. Were they deemed suicides? Were they homicides? Were they accidental? So these are things you could break down, especially, one thing about Montana, and the neighbors, the people in the community said, it's not unusual to have guns out there. It's when the guns are used in a criminal manner is where we have to be concerned about. Because the benefit of, and again, I'm not talking political, you have a Second Amendment, you have gun laws in each state, and they have the way in which how they secure firearms and how you obtain licenses and the like. Is this gun, and again, the laws of Montana, did they allow this person to have a gun, even though people had known he had some mental history? And we're seeing more and more, unfortunately, people who have no criminal background who are told to the media or later on after the fact he had mental issues. But I don't know where the connect is. Was this, that's where the issue is when you talk about gun violence. Yeah. You have guns. Is the violence from particular types of manners of death, homicide, suicide, and the like?
Now, Knudsen also mentioned that the law enforcement response is now transitioning to what's called a fugitive location operation. Is that exactly what it sounds like? Finding this guy at all costs?
That's what it comes down to. This is a person who's now he has a violence. This is an extreme violence situation. He murders people he lives next door to. This is something that you really want to make sure you get this person as soon as possible. The problem is you're talking about a large swath of territory. How far behind is law enforcement to apprehending him? He's an outdoorsman. How well does he know the outdoors there? What is the materials? And that's why the truck is important. What materials did he have in that car, in that truck, that may assist him in, avoiding law enforcement's capture?
So who is the suspect? Let's talk about this. Michael Paul Brown. So Brown apparently is an Army veteran who served from 2001 to 2005, including a deployment to Iraq from 2004 to 2005. This is according to Army officials. He later joined the Montana National Guard, serving until 2009, and left the military with the rank of sergeant. According to records that we found through Truthfinder, Brown may have also been affiliated with the Anaconda Memorial Chapter 13 of the Disabled American Veterans Organization, a nonprofit that advocates for and supports disabled veterans. It's unclear what specific role he may have had with this group, but the organization is known for being very beneficial, for helping veterans access their benefits and other support services. In interviews with the New York Times, family of Brown have described him as struggling with mental health, PTSD, diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. Several local residents describe Brown as troubled, saying he often told these wild, elaborate stories. But they added, the residents, that they'd never seen him display violent behavior in the past. Nothing, let alone what he's accused of now. His niece, Claire Boyle, told CNN, confirmed this, that Brown struggled with mental health issues both during and after his military service, and that his condition worsened significantly following the deaths of both of his parents. She also posted publicly on Facebook on August 1st, shortly after the news broke, writing, "While you're all out here talking about things we're uncertain of, there is one thing I'm certain of. Mental health is real, and it goes unmanaged and dismissed every single day. There are people who search for help and get turned away at every stop along the path. There are people who cry for help and show definite warning signs of crashing out. This town, all this town does is talk and judge. Next time you want to sit here and run your mouth, check your audience. The system is broken. The system fails us. When our veterans get turned away seeking mental health help because we can't help unless it's a harm to self or others. It's heartbreaking. But another thing I know for definite is you probably shouldn't run your mouth about people you know minimum about praying for our town today." Another post that has since apparently been taken down was cited by the Associated Press and read, "This isn't just a drunk, high man going wild. It's a sick man who doesn't know who he is sometimes and frequently doesn't know where or when he is either." Now, according to NBC News, one of Michael Paul Brown's childhood friends, Shane Charles, said the two grew up together in Anaconda. He told the outlet, "Mike was a great guy when he was on his meds. He did have some mental health problems." David, military service, reports of mental health issues, PTSD. You hear the statement from his niece. What are you taking away from this from an investigative point of view?
This is the problem we're having more. We see former military having the inability to get mental health care like they should. Law enforcement, as law enforcement, we concern ourselves with the criminal acts that take place. And the problem, and his niece is pretty accurate in the fact that if there's no criminality, there's nothing that law enforcement can do as far as forcing someone to go to a mental health facility. And, be that as it may, the issues with military, homelessness, mental health, that is something that we're very lacking. I have seen, I've worked, in my law enforcement capacity, we used to do live lineups. And one of the areas we used to go find people to participate, fillers in a sense, were homeless vets at a shelter. And it was tragic to see these individuals being, kind of pushed and set to the side. And when it comes to mental health, the military says we do what we can, but the reality is there enough being done? This is not the first person who's experienced this. He snapped. I mean, everyone knew that he had issues, but no one saw the violence in it. Now we're going to obviously backtrack and go, well, we saw the warning signs, but we did nothing about it.
Yeah.
The reality is, unless the laws change with mental health, there's not much that law enforcement can do to do that.
If they are in a position where they can negotiate with him, talk to him, again, we're in the stages of trying to find him, but if law enforcement run into a situation where they do, and it might be a tenuous situation where they have to communicate with him, based on this reporting, how do they handle that? How do they speak to him? How do they negotiate with him in that situation for a successful and safe surrender?
Well, that's the issue. Is he going to be? Is there clarity in his thought process when he's going to be engaged with law enforcement? That's something you try to negotiate. You develop a background of in a sense, a perpology. In a sense, you get a background. You know what he is. You know who he is. You try to utilize that to achieve some sort of rapport, some building a rapport between him if you can. But it also depends what type of psychosis is he in at this time when they do approach him. And that's a concern because, we don't know if he's still armed. At least the police don't know if he's still armed. We know he's murdered 4 people. We know he has lapsed taking his medication, so we don't know where his mindset is. Can you develop that clarity in that rapport? It's possible, but sometimes, that rapport may not be achieved because of his mental status right now. And not only that, he's been away for several days. Access to food and water may be limited. I don't know. And I don't think they know either. They'll just know, unfortunately, when they confront him, you hope for the best to make an apprehension and make sure no one gets hurt. That's the reality. I don't think any law enforcement officer wants to see somebody's life ended while they're trying to apprehend them.
That's the priority right now.
This thing's coming.
Yeah, that's the priority right now, right? Finding him, apprehending him successfully, safely, and then you go into the prosecution, right? And he's innocent until proven guilty. You wonder whether or not these reports of mental health may play into some sort of defense down the line, but we're not there yet. And there's one more thing I do have to add. While the mental health context definitely provides important insight into Brown's possible state of mind, assuming he did this, it is essential to emphasize this doesn't justify what happened. It doesn't erase the horror of the violence or the pain and the grief that is now facing the victim's family. Because every one of the victims, let me talk about the victims for a second, because every one of these victims was a long-time Anaconda resident. And according to authorities, Brown likely knew them. He lived next door, apparently, to the Owl Bar and was reportedly a regular there. And still, police say he largely kept to himself. The motive, if he did this, remains unclear. Investigators are still working to determine whether the attack, if he did it, was premeditated or targeted. The owner of the bar, David Guerter, told the Associated Press he knew everybody that was in that bar. I guarantee you that. He didn't have any running dispute with any of them. I just think he snapped. The family of David Leach, a well-known community member and one of the victims, released a statement to the New York Times expressing that they hold no ill feelings toward Michael Paul Brown for the tragedy, saying, "We feel great empathy to his family and we understand the mental anguish caused by veterans running from the war with PTSD and other mental issues. We greatly loved and will miss our brother Dave." Nancy Kelly, the bartender, had recently retired after a long and impactful nursing career. Her daughter, Christian Kelly, told CNN that her mother spent more than 20 years working in the ICU before transitioning to oncology care in Anaconda. Tony Palm, a familiar and beloved presence at the Owl Bar, was remembered by local resident Brent Fode, who told the Times that he often played horseshoes with Tony before. And we don't know a lot right now about Daniel Bally, but we do know he was a regular at the bar too. And officials are now offering a $7,500 reward for any information leading to Brown's arrest. So if you have information, you're urged to contact the U.S. Marshal Service tip line at the number that's displayed on your screen. We're going to put it up there right there for you. Dave, how important is the reward in order to get information here?
They're always very important. You like to see, you have to show that there is an engagement, and sometimes you do have to use monetary rewards to develop that engagement. Could it get higher later on? That's a possibility. But, it's one of the things, it's one of the tools we use to try to apprehend people who are fleeing from the law enforcement. So it's nothing unusual.
Yeah.
But the concern again is you can see how sad this is on so many levels. Within that small community, you see that the violence that he showed that day isn't like him. But this is where, and they apparently said he had PTSD, and his mental health started to decline with the loss of his parents. So he's falling into this hole, and he's not alone. And this is the other thing: is how many more are we going to have like this? How many veterans are out there who are not getting the mental health care they need? How, and this is where mental health laws come into play. Are we going to start mandating people to go to mental health facilities to get checked? VA, talking about people who've had suicidal thoughts. Unless they actually act criminally, it's hard to get people the care they need, because most of the states the person has to voluntarily engage in mental health care, and that's the thing. I don't know if he felt that way. They said he took medication, so obviously he was diagnosed somewhere with schizophrenia, but he went off the meds, and it seems like we have that situation all the time. We can't force people to ingest their medication. So law enforcement is very limited in what we can do post-incident. That's the problem. When the incident happens, then we get involved. But we can take people to the hospital, and it's up to the mental health workers. If we have an emotionally disturbed person, we call them EDPs, and we take them to the hospital. The hospital determines whether or not they're going to keep them or not. And within a certain time frame, they're back out.
Dave Sarni, it's just such a troubling, developing situation that we're currently following. We will keep an eye on it. We will see what happens next. But thank you so much for coming on and giving your expertise on this manhunt and this case. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Stay safe.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.